let me share. Okay. All right. Today is July 24, 2022. We have a Israeli-Palestinian Confederation simulation with Robert NAIMAN. We are proposing that Israelis and Palestinians could make peace by way of a common government. The common government will be for the people of Israel.
Joseph, you
Yes,
have
sir.
to share your screen.
Oh, I'm not sharing. Okay, sorry. So today is July 24, 2022, simulation, Israeli-Palestinian Confederation simulation with Robert NAIMAN. We are proposing the creation of a common government for the people of Israel and Palestine that would make peace. The common government would include the areas of Gaza, the West Bank, and Jerusalem, and Israel. The common government will be secular. It will have three branches: the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. My name is Joseph Avasar, and my email is josephavassar@gmail.com. You can send me your comments after the simulation. Our website is ipconfederation.org. You can go to our website and read the Constitution. It's in three languages: in Arabic, Hebrew, and English. So if you go to the Constitution in English or other languages, you would be able to read how this common government will be created, what it would be doing in relation to passing legislation, how the parliament will be functioning, how the executive branch will be functioning with president and vice president, and how the judicial branch. This is a government that will have separation of power between the legislative branch and the executive and the judicial branch. True separation of power between those branches. I would like to remind everyone that Ruth Chapin, that was with us until 2021, was very instrumental in helping creating this Zoom simulation. She's a lawyer. She was very, very sharp thinking until almost like a month before she passed away at the age of 93 or 92, that she helped with the simulation. And with her son, who is here now, Dan, has been helping ever since in all the simulations, who is a computer engineer, and Ruth is a lawyer, the perfect combination to help with this Zoom simulation. And I want to thank you, Dan, for helping us ever since we started with these simulation on Zoom.
Thank you.
Today's guest is Robert NAIMAN. Robert NAIMAN is the president of Truth Out and a strategic advisor to the Vermont Senate campaign of Isaac Evans, France. He is the former policy director of Just Foreign Policy. He lived in Palestine twice, once as a student at Birzeit University in the 80s, and again in 1996 as a volunteer for community peacemaker teams in Hebron. As a policy director of Just Foreign Policy, Mr. NAIMAN initiated the campaign for Congress to pass a Yemen war power resolution to end the unconstitutional US participation in the Saudi war in Yemen, and continues to work on this campaign as an independent consultant. Mr. NAIMAN is also working to make this campaign a precedent for making the US-Israeli relations comply with US laws, so that we're inviting people with all points of views, whether they are pro-Israelis, pro-Palestinians, or have a different angle on the issue. The more people we have, the more points of views we share, the better. And because we are inviting people to stress test the formula and the constitutional government that we are proposing. On August 7th, we will have Paul Sham. He's a research professor of Israel Studies at the University of Maryland. In May 26th, he wrote a Haaretz opinion page in which he said the only old/new comprehensive idea to arise in the last few years is the Confederation, short of a two-state solution 2.0. He was really talking about the Land for All plan and the Yossi Beilin plan. He was not really talking about the IPC, our proposal, but I invited him and he was delighted to come and speak to us about our plan for a common government. We will have on August 21st, Professor Frankie Wilmer. She was a Montana state legislator for 8 years, and she teaches at Montana State University. She's very familiar with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and I believe she wrote about it many times. And on September 11, we will have Professor Menachem Klein at Bar-Ilan University in Israel. He is a Middle East and Islamic Studies professor. He supports the two-state solution, but he agreed to come and talk to us about the common government that we are proposing, because I told him that the two states, that our proposal does not preclude the two-state and solution, and he agreed to come, even though personally I think that the two-state solution is a fraud. It's not going to happen, but that's beside the point. We will have a conversation with Gidon Levy, who is a Haaretz journalist. Most of you are familiar with him. He was in our simulation before, and he agreed with the concept of a common government, the way we propose. He will come in on October 2nd, and we will have Professor Ian Lustig on October 16. He's a political science professor at the University of Pennsylvania. He seemed to be very supportive of our idea for a common government, but I'm not sure that he really understood the plan. I'll have to have a meeting with him before he comes in, and hopefully we'll clarify the issues and we'll see what what his position is. Then we will have on October 30th, May Pundak. She's a feminist lawyer, activist, and social entrepreneur. She is really with Land for All. Land for All is another peace group that is, they basically believe in the two-state solution, but some sort of a combination to have shared institution, etc. We'll have her make a presentation of what is Land for All, and we'll be asking her questions. The simulation today will probably last 120 minutes. We will have several segments in the simulations. We'll read the Constitution, we'll have legislation to pass, and we will ask Robert NAIMAN after each segment, what is his take, what does he think, what's the pros and cons of the proposal that we're making after in each and every segment. We have a video that I'd like to play for you that explains what the common government, the Confederation.
The conflict between Israelis and Palestinians has endured for generations. And instead of time healing the wounds, it's only caused the anger to fester and the violence to grow. But what if there was a way to alleviate the tension? Something that may not outright solve every problem, but at least create a forum that encourages a peaceful compromise. Welcome to the Israeli-Palestinian Confederation, a common third government between the Israeli and Palestinian citizens, specifically designed to foster peace, tolerance, and economic prosperity between the two nations. Here's how it works. First off, both Israel and Palestine will keep their respective governments. Israel's Knesset and the Palestinian National Authority will remain unchanged. The Israeli-Palestinian Confederation, IPC, will be a third entity acting as a unifying agent between the two. The IPC will comprise 300 parliament members elected from 300 districts in Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza. Above them will preside a president and vice president, one Israeli and one Palestinian. In order for the IPC to pass a law, it will require a 55% majority from its Israeli representatives, as well as a 55% majority from its Palestinian representatives, thereby preventing either side from monopolizing the legislature. Of course, the IPC won't undermine the political power of either the Israeli or the Palestinian government. At any time, Israel or Palestine may veto a law passed by the IPC. If neither side vetoes, the law is passed. And the two nations are another step closer to resolution. Please help us make this a reality. The Israeli-Palestinian Confederation. We might speak different languages, but we all mean the same thing.
So what we are really going to be doing today is simulating what was in that video. Before we start with the simulation, I would like to conduct a pre-simulation survey. Please vote on the simulation survey. At this time, do you support the creation of a common government for the people of Israel and Palestine? Please vote yes or no. So we'll have some sort of a starting point. And we will conduct the same survey at the end of the simulation to see if we change minds. Okay, I'll give it another several seconds for people to vote. Right now, I see 87%. In other words, 13 out of 15 yes, which is 87%. 2 out of 15 no, which is 13%. I have a feeling I know who these two are, but let's maybe give Jay he's joining us now. Jay, do you want to vote on this? Okay, I don't see Jay responding, so let's end the polling. Okay, so yeah, Jay voted, I think, yes, so it's 88%. And share the results. 88% said yes, 13% no, said no. I mean, 88 and 13, I think, is more than 100, but I guess, I don't know how that could be, but in other words, 2 said no.
Rounding, it's a rounding issue.
And 14 said yes. and we'll go on. We'll do the same survey later on when we are done with the simulation. The purpose of the simulation is to demonstrate how a common government could make peace. We are not having a historical review of who is to blame, although I think that it is extremely important to talk about the history and who is to blame and who is initiated this. But at this time, we are not doing that. We are not anti-Israel or anti-Palestine. We are pro-peace. And we are asking you not to digress from the objective of the simulation. Again, this is not about the simulation itself right now. It's not that we are precluding discussion about the who is right and who is wrong, but at this time we want to focus about the simulation, about the common government that we are proposing. Mr. NAIMAN is not a representative of the IPC. I met with him several days ago. He seemed to be accepting the idea, but he's not a representative. I'm not sure that he knows all the ins and outs of this, and that's why he's invited to the simulation. And he's invited really to conduct a stress test. We do not follow the Israeli narrative or the Palestinian narrative. We are pro-peace, and we think that once the common government will be created, it will have a global view, not an Israeli view, not a Palestinian view, but a global view for the benefit of everyone, because it will be a common government, Israelis and Palestinian parliament members from 300 districts representing each parliament member representing his or her district, and the totality of the 300 parliament members will generate a global view of the entire area of Israel, Gaza, and the West Bank. And we do not preclude other formulas. All formulas are welcome to present themselves. We think that our formula is the best, but we are not saying it's the only one. We will ask Robert, could the IPC formula attain peace? These are the standards where we're asking you to judge the plan. Could it make peace? Is it implementable? And is there a downside to the Israeli or the Palestinians? I believe that the answer to the first question is yes, the second question is yes, and the third question is no. We are going to be proposing, I believe, 3 legislation if we have time, but we are able that 3 legislation that the common government could pass that would not be subject to a veto by the Israeli or the Palestinian, or that the Israeli or the Palestinian government would lose legitimacy if they veto those legislation. We think that these are good examples of how the common government could work under the IPC formula. We are not the Israeli government, we're not the common government. These are just proposals. These are not real legislation, these are just proposals. The common government could decide on by itself how to create peace, what common legislation to pass. These are just an example. I believe that this is also the tip of the iceberg. We have a lot more legislation than we can show you today, but we are limited by time. I'm asking you, please avoid asking technical questions and refrain from comments. Please ask questions. I am encouraging you to ask questions, as many questions as you can, but sincere questions, not comments that are disguised as questions. Please ask questions. Keep your comments to the end or put them in the chat. The chat is a very powerful feature. It applies to everyone will see the chat. These are facts that I think no one will dispute at this time. that the Israeli prime minister represents the Israelis only, that the Palestinian leaders, the PA and Hamas, they represent the Palestinians only. But we're asking you to make these assumptions for purposes of the simulation. So these are not facts. These are assumptions that I am asking you to make to conduct the simulation. Now, you can challenge those assumptions, but in order to conduct the simulation, I'm asking you to accept those assumptions. In other words, you can say at the end, hey, Joseph, these assumptions do not make sense. But for now, I'm asking you to accept them. First of all, that we conducted an online election, meaning on the internet, for the last 3 months. So there is a starting date and an ending date, and the ending date is today. That we, the common government, permitted 14 million people, excluding minors, but in general, 14 million people in Gaza, the West Bank, and in Israel to vote. That at the end of the 3 months, 5 million people voted. 3 million Palestinian voted and 2 million Israelis voted. These are part of the assumptions. I want you to assume that the president received 1.5 million votes and the vice president received 1.3 million votes. So I want you to assume that me, Joseph, I was elected president by 1.5 million votes. So that it's clear, I'm not ever planning to run for president. I'm not even qualified to do so, but just for the purposes of the simulation, it makes it easier for me to conduct the simulation if I am the president. The vice president is a Palestinian lady. She received 1.3 million votes. We will rotate in 2 years. I also want you to assume that 300 parliament members were elected in 300 districts, and each parliament member represents one district of 47,000. In other words, if you divide 14 million by 300, you'll get 47,000. So each parliament member represents 47,000 people. He or she does not represent the entire Israeli or Palestinian nation. They represent their district exclusively, and they are required to see what's best for their district. So let me ask Robert, are you willing to accept those assumptions?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any philosophical, any thinking that these assumptions are not achievable?
No.
Okay. Is there anyone in the audience that is not willing to accept those assumptions? I hear no objection. You can voice them later. I believe that these assumptions are achievable with a relatively small financial commitment. I want to remind you that a full-fledged war between Israel and Gaza, one day of a full-fledged war between Israel and Gaza, with all the missiles, with all coming in and the shooting, is over $100 million a day. The $100 million could make these assumptions a reality, in my opinion. So now I'm asking, first of all, I need to have volunteers to act as either Israeli prime minister, Hamas leader, and a PA president. Do I have an Israeli prime minister? Someone
Yes. Yes.
Okay, Len. Okay, Len, you were Israeli prime minister before. And let me ask you this. Are you willing to act, to assume his personality? Right now we have Yair Lapid as the prime minister. Are you willing to assume his personality, or are you really going to be acting as Len Bennett?
I have no problem. I'm assuming the personality of the Prime Minister of Israel.
The current Prime Minister of Israel. We are
Yeah.
now.
At the moment, right?
Yeah.
The interim Prime Minister.
Okay. And do we have a Hamas leader? Do we have someone who's willing to assume the personality of Hamas leader to act as Hamas leader? You will be given a veto power, just like the Prime Minister of Israel. Do I have a Hamas leader? I need cooperation from you guys. Okay, do I have someone? Charles, are you willing to?
If no one else wants to do it, I'll do it.
Okay, but you understand you have to assume his personality. You're not Charles, you're,
I understand.
okay. And do we have a PA? A PA leader, Palestinian Authority leader?
I can do that.
Okay, what's your name?
Karen.
Okay, Karen. Again, you understand that you have to assume the personality, the political personality of the current PA leader.
A boss, yes.
Okay, good. Okay, so the rest of you, I will be asking you to be either Israeli or Palestinian parliament members. Keep in mind that your district, I'm going to show you a map. Your district is, if you are Palestinian or Israeli, this map will help you decide. You represent a district. You don't represent yourself, you represent a district. Your district could be exclusively Palestinian, it could be exclusively Israeli, or it could be both. I am asking you to be intellectually honest and to decide in your own mind, do you represent a district that is exclusively Palestinian, exclusively Israeli, or a mixed district? And I may ask you, what is your district, the district you are representing, when we get to the substantive discussion? So let's now, I'm asking you, let's have the declaration of who you are. Dan, can you put the, I'll ask you, and now I'm going to ask the Palestinian parliament member, just vote yes, so we know how many Palestinian parliament members we have. Palestinian parliament members only, please vote yes. Okay, publish the poll. We have 7 Palestinian parliament members. Okay, there may be joining others. I've seen it, people join later, that's fine. A lot of people are reluctant to participate. I understand that, but you can join later at either Palestinian or Israeli. Let's have Israeli parliament members now, please vote yes, so we know how many we have. Okay. Okay, so we have, can you publish the result? We have 3 Israeli parliament members. I am assuming that the person who voted no is still Israeli parliament member. So we have 3 Israeli parliament members and we have 7 Palestinian parliament members. And so we're going to, okay. And let's start with the Constitution. Libby, could you please read the Constitution?
Sure. We believe that Palestinians and Israelis are entitled to equal rights under the law and guaranteed human rights and freedom. The Israeli-Palestinian Confederation does not intend to supersede or supplant the Palestinian or Israeli governments, nor to abrogate or undermine any agreements between those governments. We recognize the need to work with the Israeli and Palestinian governments. Our purpose is to resolve conflicts and to expand the relationship between Palestinians and Israelis in a fair and equitable manner. We believe in equal rights under the law, guaranteed human rights, and freedom for all.
Okay, so the important paragraph here is that we are the common government. We have a parliament, we have a president, and we do not intend to supersede or supplant any agreements between the Israeli and the Palestinian governments. So if they agree to have two states, we are fine with that constitutionally. We are not allowed to undermine that agreement. If they agree to a one state, if they agree to anything between them, constitutionally, we are prohibited from interfering with any agreements between the Israeli and the Palestinian governments. Okay, let's go to page 2. And by the way, this is not really the Constitution. This is an explanation of the Constitution. The real Constitution is on the website. Go ahead, Libby, please.
We voluntarily give the legislatures and the governments of Israel and Palestine veto power over legislation we pass relating to the domain of control of those governments. We believe in the separation of power between the legislative, executive, and judicial branches. We believe in the creation of a permanent secular government for all the people residing in Israel and Palestine. We believe in having a separate judicial branch relating to IPC legislation with Israeli and Palestinian judges, with a system to avoid biased decisions based on nationality.
Okay, so the important part of this is that we say all the legislation that we pass that affects the domain and control of either the Israeli or the Palestinian government is subject to a veto by the Israeli and the Palestinian governments. So if they veto it, it's not going to pass. Does anyone have any question regarding the Constitution? Robert, do you have any questions regarding the Constitution?
I do not.
Okay. So I hear no questions about it. Let's have a vote on the, first of all, let's have the Palestinian parliament members voting to ratify the Constitution. Do you support the Israeli-Palestinian Confederation Constitution? Palestinian parliament members only, please vote. Okay. Please share the results. So we actually have 9 Palestinian, and 100% of them voted yes. Stop sharing. Let's go to the Israeli parliament members. And by the way, let me just, before you vote, I just want to remind you that in order to be part of the Constitution, you have to pledge allegiance to the Constitution. You cannot say, I do not accept the Constitution and be a parliament member. So we've seen before people say no. In reality, they will be expelled from the Constitution, from the parliament. Let's have the Israeli parliament members please vote. Okay, so let's end the polling. All Israeli parliament members voted. So we have, congratulations, we have a constitution that was passed, ratified by the Israeli and the Palestinian Confederation Common Government Parliament. That's a momentous event in the history of humanity, because both Israelis and the Palestinian people, through their representatives, ratified an important constitution. Okay, now let's go to the first order of business. And let me just respond to those who said that the Israeli or the Palestinian government may object. First of all, they have no reason to object. They would not only do they not have a reason, they don't have the legal authority, the moral authority to object. They may lose legitimacy if they object. And in the past, when we did have an attempt to create this common government in 2012, they did not object, and they never attempted to disrupt. We did have a full-page ad in the New York Times. This is real. This is not a simulated event. This is a real event. We had a full-page ad in the New York Times that ran on October 1st, 2012, which announced the upcoming election. The Israeli government, the Palestinian government did not attempt to interrupt or interfere in any manner, shape, or form. Okay, this is the first order of business, is to, Libby, could you please read it, please?
This is about grant veto power. The Confederation is the government of the entire population of Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza. We hereby bestow a veto power relating to legislation affecting sovereignty to the following: the government of Israel, the Palestinian Authority, Hamas. In the event of changes in governments, this legislation may be amended or repealed.
Okay, so that's important because some people ask me, well, what if there is no Israeli government or Palestinian government or Hamas government? This is legislation. It's not part of the Constitution. It's legislation. It can be amended. So if those governments no longer exist, we can change the legislation according to the reality on the ground. If there is a new government, we will change that. So does anyone have any questions regarding this declaration to grant the veto power? And by the way, the Israeli and the Palestinian governments do not have a veto over that because it is part of our declaration. It does not infringe on the sovereignty of the Israeli or the Palestinian governments. Robert, do you have any question regarding this veto power?
I do not.
Okay. Does anyone have any question regarding the declaration to grant the veto power before we take a vote? Okay, hearing no questions, let's have the Palestinian parliament members please vote. Do you support the declaration of intent to grant a veto power? Palestinian parliament members only. We have 9 Palestinian parliament members. Okay. All right, so share the results, stop sharing. 100% voted in favor of this declaration to give a veto power to the Israeli and the Palestinian governments. Let's go to the Israeli parliament members. Do you support the declaration to intend to grant a veto power to the Israeli and the Palestinian governments? Okay. Share the results. 100% of the Israeli parliament members voted in favor of giving it a veto power. Let's turn to Robert now and ask him, Robert, you've seen a monumental event in the history of Israel-Palestine, the creation of a common government, the creation of a ratification of the Constitution, and an agreement by both sides, up to now 100%, to give a veto power to the government of Israel, the Palestinian, and the authority of Hamas. Do you have any general comments regarding the momentous event?
I think it's a good idea. That's why I voted yes.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Let's go to the next order of business. And that's a joint economic zone. I met with Robert. I asked him what legislation he wants to discuss. He gave me the legislation, and this is the first one, a joint economic zone. Libby, could you please read?
Joint economic zone between Israel and Gaza. Exclusive IPC management and control. Common economy. Education, industry, agriculture, sewer treatment, desalination plants, solar farms, wind power, and green energy. International airport and seaport. equally accessible to Israeli and Palestinians. We hereby submit this legislation to the Israeli government, the Palestinian government, and Hamas. We bestow upon them a veto power which may be exercised in the next 60 days.
Okay, so before we take a vote and before we give it to the Israeli government and the Palestinian government, does anyone have any question regarding this legislation to create a joint economic zone? All right, hearing no question, let's have the vote. Let's have the Palestinian parliament members please vote. Palestinian parliament members. Okay, I believe we have, okay, one more need to vote. Okay, I guess, okay. And polling, 100% of the Palestinian parliament members voted in favor of this legislation. Let's go to the Israeli parliament members. Please vote, Israeli parliament members, please vote. Okay, let's publish the vote. 75% of the Israeli parliament members voted yes. That meets the constitutional requirements. And let's stop sharing. And let's go to the Hamas leader. Mr. Hamas leader, are you going to veto this legislation?
No.
Okay, let's go to the Israeli prime minister. Are you going to veto this legislation?
Yes.
Okay, and let's go to the PA leader. Are you going to veto this legislation?
No.
Okay, now, Mr. Prime Minister, do you want to, can you make any suggestions that would, to this legislation that would be make it more accessible, more acceptable to your government?
Yes, I object to exclusive IPC management and control over an area which includes ports and an airport. So I certainly would not give up control of who can enter the country. So you cannot, I certainly agree with economic zones. There are many joint economic zones, and I think they're a wonderful idea, but they can't be run by IPC.
Okay, you understand, do you not, that the IPC includes Israeli and Palestinians working together under a common command, and many of the Israelis that are in the common police force are also in the Israeli Defense Force.
You're talking about a common police force, which has not come up yet today, and I don't accept that either. Well, I don't want to bring up a problem, but a problem is that we don't have any borders at this point for a state of Palestine. And so that makes the whole thing more difficult.
Okay. All right, so let's have
Joseph, could I, as a member of, as an Israeli member of the IPC parliament, could I make a compromise proposal to the Israeli Prime Minister that to stress in our decision on this joint economic zone that Israel will have constant ability to monitor, control, and veto any actions that it considers dangerous, as long as it accepts the principle of a joint economic zone?
Oh, I think the joint economic zone is excellent. So I certainly go along with joint economic zones, the same as there are joint economic agreements, bilateral agreements with many countries that have between each other. But right, but my objection is that it can't be run exclusively by the IPC.
So
And-
if we have a joint management of the airport and port facilities where Israeli officials have the ability to control and closely monitor who is coming in and out, would that be satisfactory to you?
Yes,
Okay, could you repeat that? What was the compromise?
That Israeli government officials have the ability, are associated with the management of the airport and port, so that they know exactly who is coming in and out, and they can have a say in controlling that.
Okay, but that would also have to be Palestinian officials,
Of course.
Palestinian officials.
Yes.
So is
It
this
would be a
acceptable to you,
reciprocal
Mr. Prime Minister, that both Israeli and Palestinian officials would be in charge of,
Associated in the management.
would be involved in the common management? Mr. Prime
yes,
Minister.
yes, involve the common management, but the PA cannot restrict who comes into this airport if it's in Israel's interests.
Okay, I think we could sort out those details later, as long as we agree on the principle that Israel has full control of what's going on in the port and the airport.
Yes,
Well, it cannot have full control. It has participatory control. And the same with the Palestinian, with the Hamas organization, that they would have participatory control to the same extent as the Israeli participatory control. Would that be acceptable to you, Mr. Prime Minister?
well, if somebody is coming into an airport, you'd have to have then separate entry gates for people going into the PA and people going into Israel.
Why is that?
Well,
Why can't they all come in the same way, but to have inspectors from your military and inspector for Hamas standing there equally together and doing equally participating in the observation of what's going on?
there are people going to come in that are acceptable to Israel, and Israel wants them to come in, such as tourists, who the PA may not want to come in. And the PA cannot stop people coming in.
Okay, well, actually, Hamas is in control of Gaza. So I am proposing that there will be Israeli forces and Palestinian forces at the same time with the IPC police monitoring, and then we will have a one-by-one decision on each issue that comes up, and both sides will have a veto power over those decisions.
No, the Palestinian Authority or Hamas is not having any veto decision of who comes into Israel.
Well, it's
excuse
not coming
me.
into Israel, it's coming into
Yeah.
the joint economic zone.
Well, if it's a joint zone, that means it's an airport that is used by Israelis. We say that here. If you want to put an airport there and call it part of Hamas, then it's a Hamas airport and they run the airport.
No. It's going to be a joint economic zone.
I agree with joint economic zones.
Okay, in
we're
the joint economic zone, there will have a joint police, a joint airport. The airport will be managed by the IPC police, but it will also be monitored by the Israeli and the Palestinian police.
I think that's far too complicated. it's gonna take hours and hours for everybody to have to go through the Israeli immigration, and then PA immigration, and then Hamas immigration.
I don't think you are, okay, but even if it is complicated, you have an objection to that. But you're gonna veto this compromise.
Well, I'm vetoing it. Listen, I accept the economic zones, and I'm sure there are economic zones now between the PA and Israel. So those aren't a problem. The problem is when you're talking about immigration coming in and out. That's an issue.
Okay.
As-
We
can I-
need
can
to,
I-
we need
as
to
the
cut this
Hamas leader,
short.
can I make
We
a
need to cut
suggestion?
this short, okay? I'm talking about a joint economic zone in Israel and Gaza, okay? There is
Does
no,
not that imply that the Hamas control points would be at the entrance between Gaza and the economic zone, and the Israeli control points would be between Israel and the economic zone?
yeah, good.
And
good.
within the economic zone, the IPC with advice and consent from both Hamas
Yeah, good.
and Israel forces. But so it's a buffer zone between the two, which is recognized, to have this special, access. That's what makes the possibility of having a joint economic zone. I mean, is that acceptable, Mr. Prime Minister?
Perfect.
I'm not
Israel-
sure.
Israel controls the Israeli side in terms of entrance into Israel, and they also control who enters from Israel into the economic zone. So Israel has total control on the Israeli side of the economic zone. And in terms of who can come in and out of Gaza into the economic zone, Hamas controls that. But within the economic zone, the IPC has some jurisdiction and control.
I think bilateral agreements with PA and Israel is what controls this, not the IPC.
Okay, Charles, your solution is brilliant. It's a good solution. And I can tell you, Mr. Prime Minister, that I think that this parliament, that the Hamas leader made a brilliant, and if you are not going to accept his very reasonable,
He's got responsibility to the state of Israel. Don't
Yeah.
blame him for his viewpoint.
yeah, but if you, Mr. Prime Minister, are not going to accept this, I, as the president of the whole thing,
Here we go.
I am going to campaign against you because I think that you're looking for excuses not to have a joint economic zone, because a very reasonable solution has been presented to you.
Listen,
And-
let's understand one thing. Israel is one of the top 10 countries in the world. We know how to run an economy. We've got a massive economy. You have zero experience. The PA has zero experience. Hamas has zero experience. You want to build airports and ports, you need Israel doing it. So you are not taking,
No.
you are not, you cannot, you don't have the muscle to do this. Israel
Okay.
does.
With all due respect, Mr. Prime Minister, you have tremendous amount of economic experience, a tremendous amount of military experience, but you have zero experience in making peace. And this is what we are talking about.
Well, I think you're blinkered.
All right.
We have the
Okay, let's go.
Abraham Accords
I
now,
think,
and
I
most
think
of the Muslim world will be making peace with Israel. So
okay, we're not talking about the Muslim world. We're talking about your inability to make peace. The Palestinians in Gaza, 2 million people, are not able to travel. They live in a open prison. and we have a very, very reasonable solution to this. And I think you're looking for every excuse, even though a very reasonable solution has been presented to you. And I'm just going to campaign against you because I think that you are not you're not sincere in your objection.
You
All
were
right.
you were assuming the reason there is not peace is because of Israel. And why don't you assume?
No, I am
Why-
saying,
yes,
I am
yes,
saying
you have said.
I'm saying you are the prime minister. You're looking for every excuse in order to continue the blockade on Gaza. And we have been presenting a very reasonable excuse, a very reasonable
Excuse
solution.
me, the United Nations has said the military blockade of Gaza is legal and necessary. So we'll take
Okay.
you away to peace.
You're avoiding the issue.
Mr. Prime Minister, may I say that by being the only one who's vetoing this measure, you are exposing yourself as being the only one who is not looking for a peaceful solution. I am ashamed of you as an Israeli citizen that you are my prime minister.
Well, then you'll vote for somebody else in the next election.
Yes, and I, as the president of the whole area, I am going to campaign and I'm going to help to try to have your coalition, which is a very fragile coalition. I am going to see to it that it would be disrupted and that you will get a no confidence vote in your parliament because you are exposing your people. There is a tremendous solution for peace here, to give peace to both the Palestinians and the Israelis, and you're looking for every excuse to continue the blockade.
But
The UN agrees with the blockade, whether you do or not.
wait a minute. Len, did Len ever, he accepts the idea of a joint economic zone?
Absolutely, 100%.
Okay. Then in the way that I suggested it, with Israel having complete control over access for everything except from the Gaza side.
The economic zone implies and means that there's going to be huge traffic going back and forth on all sides. There's no question about it.
Well, huge traffic, but like any, entrance point into Israel, it would be controlled by Israeli customs control. Right?
Yeah, Charles, allow me to point out that there's also another issue. It's clear that all parties in this joint economic zone, Israel and the Palestinian Authority and Hamas, have an interest in having some say as to which ships, which airplanes are arriving or leaving from that zone. There might be, for whatever reason, objections to certain cargoes or certain things. So there should be, it's not only an issue of the borders of the economic zone facing Israel or a Palestinian territory, but it's also a question of having joint management of the administration of their facilities, but with no single party being able to completely block the process. They could have limited power of veto, but not. And I think all these are easily reachable solutions when you come down to the nitty-gritty of writing down the regulations that would run the operation. It's a question of
all right, let's go to Robert. We need to go to the next legislation. Robert.
Just let me say one more thing. If you just take out the line exclusive IPC management and control, then I buy the package.
Okay, so you are buying the compromise that
no, I'm buying it if you take out exclusive IPC management and control.
All right, okay. So
that's exactly what I was going to suggest.
The rest of it, I'm perfectly happy with. Airports, these proposals have been made before, especially a port out in the Mediterranean with a causeway going into Gaza. These are all great ideas.
All right, let's go to Robert. Robert, you've seen what's been played in front of you. do you have any comments about this joint economic zone? And
I was going to make exactly the same suggestion that was just made, to remove that one line. That seems to be the sticking point. Everybody agrees with everything else. So let's remove that one line and approve the rest.
okay. All right, so, okay, so let's vote. Palestinian parliament members, let's assume that that one line, this line, exclusive IPC management and control has been, do you support a joint economic zone? Okay, let's publish the vote. Let's have the Israeli vote, Israeli parliament members. And the voting. And the polling, okay. Let's go to the, we know the Israeli already agreed on that. Let's go to the Hamas leader. Are you going to accept this new legislation on the joint economic zone?
Yes,
Are you, what about the PA leader? Are you going to accept this?
Yes.
Okay, all right, great. So let's go back to Robert. Robert, we are asking for you to opine on what you've just seen.
Obviously, I think this is tremendously important. I think we all agree that, I suspect that we all agree that this is tremendously important, both because of the economic needs and because the more
Wait,
they're
what is
successful.
tremendously important? The joint economic zone or
Yes,
the
yes,
process itself?
cooperation on economic and environmental projects, Israeli-Palestinian cooperation on economic environmental development projects. This is tremendously important, both because of the outcomes that we need, dealing with the crises of water, for example, but also because the successful economic cooperation will build peace. If people have jobs, if they're employed, if problems of freedom of movement are solved, people can travel. That's going to build peace and cooperation in a virtuous circle.
All right, let's go to the next one. Installation of high-speed connecting Israel and Palestine. Installation of high-speed, oh, go ahead, Libby, I'm sorry.
Okay, you want to read it?
You read it.
All right. Installation of a high-speed train connecting the entire state of Israel and the West Bank and Gaza to transport people and goods to the international airport and the joint economic zone. And we hereby submit this legislation to the Israeli government, Palestinian government, and Hamas, and they can veto in 60 days.
Okay. Any questions? Let's have the Palestinian parliament members please vote. Do you support a high-speed train connecting Israel and Palestine? Okay. 100% of the Palestinian voted yes. The Palestinian parliament members, let's go to the Israeli parliament members, please vote. We need more Israeli parliament members. There's only one voted, so I don't, okay, two. Okay, let's end the polling. Also 100% voted, 2 out of 2. We have 3, but one disappeared apparently or doesn't want to vote. Let's go to the Hamas leader. Are you going to veto this legislation?
no,
And the Israeli prime minister, are you going to veto this legislation?
No,
The PA leader, are you going to veto this legislation?
Nope.
Okay, great. Let's go to Robert. Robert, do you have any comments regarding this legislation?
I think it's tremendously important. It's one of the problems that Palestinians complain about all the time, as everyone here knows, the difficulty of movement, and which has gotten worse in the last 20 years. The difficulty in traveling between the West Bank and Gaza, difficulty in traveling between different parts of the West Bank, difficulty in traveling from the West Bank to East Jerusalem. If this problem is solved, or at least addressed, or to the greater extent that the freedom of movement and speed of movement, faster you
Right.
can go, the better you can.
Right.
That's going to help economic development. So I think this is tremendously important. I'm very
Okay.
happy to see it.
Let's go to the next one. That's the last one we'll have today. Demolition of, Libby, could you please read the demolition of the wall?
Demolition of the wall in Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza, calling on Israel to demolish the wall within 2 years from the time an agreement is reached by the Israeli, the Palestinian, and the Confederation governments to provide security for the entire population. Negotiations to commence within 30 days with a 6-month time limit. And this is submitted for this legislation to the government, and they can veto it within 60 days.
Okay, let's have the Palestinian parliament members please vote. Do you support this legislation relating to this separation wall? Okay, and the polling. Share the results. 100% of the Palestinian parliament members voted in favor of this. Let's have the Israeli parliament members vote. Do you support this legislation relating to the separation wall? Okay. Please end the polling. Share the results. 100% of the Israeli parliament members voted in favor of this. Okay, let's go to the Israeli Prime Minister. Are you going to veto this legislation?
Yes,
Okay, let's go to the Hamas leader. Are you going to veto this legislation?
No.
And let's go to the PA. Are you going to veto this legislation?
No.
Okay. Israeli Prime Minister, is there any changes that we can make in order to facilitate the demolition of the wall that would be in a safe way for Israel?
many countries in the world have walls separating themselves from their neighbors. Israel has every right to do that, and it's nobody else's business whether Israel has a wall separating itself from Gaza, for example, or Egypt, or Jordan, or any more than Canada.
Are you refusing to have negotiations to commence in 30 days in order to see if there is a way to demolish the wall and in a safe way for Israel? Are you refusing to enter this negotiations?
You have no right to ask Israel to take away its border walls.
You have the right. We are the legitimate government of the Israeli-Palestinian area.
That's right.
Wait, you said we have been elected by 5 million people. We are the only legitimate government for this area. So
that's an absurdity. You operate only.
No, it's not an absurdity.
You operate.
Okay? No, it is. We had an election, and the election, 5 million people have given us the legitimacy. So you have to understand that we are a legitimate government, in fact, more legitimate than your government, because your government is only elected by the Israeli people.
Yeah,
we are
when I see you having a seat at the UN, we'll discuss that point further. Meanwhile, no government in the world tells any other government whether they can have a security barrier between them and their neighbors. It doesn't exist anywhere in the world, and there's no reason for Israel to be told by a committee that it can't have security on its own borders. You
Len-
can't tell, you don't tell that to
Len,
you. Yes,
Can I ask Len a question,
yes.
Joseph?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so the difference in this situation is that the barrier is de facto internal to Israel, because Israel controls all the territory and it's in the process of annexing it. So that security barrier that it has erected is ostensibly within the area that it controls, creating a human rights situation. Now, the purpose of the barrier is maintained, theoretically, according to the government of Israel, for its own security. So my question to you, Mr. Prime Minister, is this an effective, seeing as how this creates a hardship, anger, resentment, hatred, et cetera, because of the hardship, seeing as how it creates this reaction within the Palestinian community, is there possibly a more effective means of securing Israel's security rather than a wall, something that would be more effective?
Yeah,
than the existence of the wall.
what would be more effective is Palestinian terrorism ending in Israel, and there'll be no case for it during.
Exactly. So what? Yes, exactly.
Well,
So what are the conditions? What are the conditions that would lead to that being the case?
Okay,
my question.
I will give you several. First of all, the PLO will have to call a committee, which it never has, that removes its pledge to kill every Israeli, and Hamas will have to remove its constitutional pledge to
Palestinian
kill every Jew
conspiracy.
in the world. And when we have that, then listen,
Palestinian conspiracy again.
well, that's right. Well, excuse me, Jews have a right to believe when their enemies say they want to kill them.
Can we stay
Mr.
within,
Prime Minister,
can we
Mr.
stay
Prime
within the
Minister,
simulation? Stay within the
Mr. Prime
simulation.
Minister, you are not a person of peace because you are refusing to enter into negotiation. We're not saying you need to agree.
It's not your business where
It is my business. I already told you.
I
I already told you it is my business. In
other
fact,
words,
it's not your business.
Are you telling me
You are
declaring-
interfering. You are interfering in the lives of my people. My people are the Israeli and the Palestinians, and you have a wall that is interfering. That is horrific. You're interfering with my people, and I am giving you.
I would like to go visit a dying friend in the United States. I'm in Canada. I cannot get in now.
No, you're not in Canada. You are the Prime Minister of
I don't have to
Israel.
listen to why you have to be more pure than every other country in the world.
Yeah, okay.
It's my country. First of all, there is no Palestine now. There never has been. When there is a two-state solution and there's a border between well, you may find out that the Palestinians will want to set up their own border
You're
walls.
not really acting as Israeli Prime Minister. You're acting as Len.
Yes,
Okay.
I am. I'm
No,
telling you
cannot.
that-
I asked you because I knew you're going to change your personality. I asked you, are you willing to act as Israeli Prime Minister? Assuming
am.
you said yes, and now you're talking to me about Canada.
Well,
okay?
I'm giving you an illustration.
No, I don't want an illustration.
Fine.
This is a
It's okay.
simulation.
As the-
Okay, you
the current-
wanted to act as Israeli Prime
Okay,
Minister.
Good. Can I answer? you?
Okay, and you have to understand the constellation of decisions that an Israeli Prime Minister has to make.
The
You
current
cannot
prime
change
minister.
your personality to Len all of a sudden. And I don't want to deal with Len, okay?
Listen.
Len is not part of this simulation.
The current prime minister is extending, working on the wall right now. So the current prime minister is extending the wall and fixing holes that have been cut into the wall. So no country in the world can have anybody else tell them that they cannot protect their borders.
Well, okay, all right, let's go to have a general discussion because we are not getting anywhere here. But I think we are, because we are demonstrating how, I mean, land change personalities in the middle, but let's have a general discussion before we.
Perhaps a discussion on the future status of the wall would be a way of downsizing the conversation for the moment, and that whatever comes from a future status conversation is something that all sides could talk about and guarantee Israeli security and access from the Palestinian West Bank.
That's right. I agree with that.
All right. Okay, let's go to Robert. Robert, what are you thinking about the process that we just displayed in front of you? And then we'll go to Giacomo.
Are you talking about the whole process since the beginning?
Yeah,
of
the whole process.
Of the simulation, or just the discussion on the wall?
The whole process of having, we're done with the wall, that we didn't reach an
Okay.
agreement on the wall. I'm asking you, you have seen a formula that we are presenting for peace based on a common government, that a common government could be created and a common government could pass legislations. We think that would create a certain dynamic in the area that would, in my opinion, or in our opinion, could change the discussion and could make peace. I am asking you, as someone with your experience, to tell us, what do you think about that process?
So I think that I approve, I support that process, and I think that the experience that we had so far today illustrated one of the points that was in the video, which is that this might not solve all of the problems. So today we weren't able to successfully address the problem of the wall, but we were able to achieve other agreements. So it's still a step. We solve some problems, but not others. That's much better than not solving any problems. And particular solving the problems of the economic problems and the problems of freedom of movement, those are huge. So I take that as positive, if even with the difficult dynamics that we've just seen, we can still come to some agreements that solve some problems.
Could you tell us a little bit about Truth Out? What did they do, and what's their significance in the constellation?
Truth Out is an online news publication in the United States that publishes a daily newsletter with original reporting, as well as some reprints from other publications. And it is, the daily newsletter is received by hundreds of thousands of people. And as we discussed when I met with you a few days ago, I would say that it is influential among progressive Americans who care about reforming U.S. foreign policy, and particularly ending the wars, preventing new wars, and trying to move the U.S. government towards resolving international conflicts through diplomacy and negotiations, and removing U.S. government or reducing U.S. government support for gross abusers of human rights, and enforcing U.S. laws that try to prevent U.S. participation in international crimes, like the War Powers Resolution of 1973, the Arms Export Control Act of 1976, the Leahy Law, the Foreign Assistance Act. We're making progress on these things. And Truth Out is one of the reasons, because in order to do these things, we need to be able to tell Americans about them. Many of these issues are not well covered, as I'm sure everybody here already knows, in the mainstream US media. It was years before the mainstream US media even reported on the war in Yemen, let alone the US participation in the war in Yemen. So that's what Truth Out does, and that's what Truth Out's significance is.
Does Truth Out believe that Israel, that the United States is not acting legally with respect to its policies to the Middle East, Israel, Palestine in particular?
Well, Truth Out is a news organization, so it doesn't have beliefs in that sense. It's not a political advocacy group that takes positions like that. But it does make editorial choices about what kind of news it publishes and doesn't publish. And it does try to report on and educate Americans about efforts to get the US to comply with international law, efforts to end the wars, preventing new ones, efforts to promote diplomacy. So for example, it's been consistently reporting on the efforts to end unconstitutional US participation in the Saudi war in Yemen during periods where this issue is not appearing in the US media at all. Now, right now, the bill has been reintroduced. It's got more than 100 sponsors in the House, a bunch of sponsors in the Senate, including Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Leahy, Dick Durbin, #2 Democrat in the Senate. There's very little stuff about this, even now in the mainstream US media, even as President Biden was going to Saudi Arabia. So outlets like Truth Out are really important for Americans who care about these issues to be able to find out what's going on with them.
Okay. I saw a hand by Giacomo. You still want to ask the question, Giacomo?
Well, I was just making a general comment about this simulation right now, and I'm thinking just it was a very great idea to have Len as a Israeli prime minister, because he animated the discussion, and we actually perhaps made more progress this time than in previous simulations, and it is very important to have this sort of dialogue. The IPC cannot remain as a unique feature without consulting the other bodies, the other elected or anyway somehow legitimate organizations.
I agree. Charles, you have a question or comment?
Yeah, a similar comment to Giacomo. I think Len's participation is very important because, and Joseph's leaving, okay. Well, Len, you represent a large constituency of the Israeli electorate. And I do not see the IPC becoming successful unless accommodation is reached with such a constituency. And that you don't necessarily look at things in terms of security in the same way that many other people participating in this, these simulations do, is not something I think we should waste time arguing over. I think it's just something that we see how we can work with that. And I think we did make some progress this time, and I just wanted to acknowledge that.
I think so.
Well, I apologize. I had to visit the bathroom.
Yeah. I really
Can I
wanted
ask
you
a
to hear
question?
that.
I'd like to ask a question of Charles.
Sure.
Charles, just said, you said it's up to us, or it's somebody to reach out to the constituency that Len represents, a way of thinking. We have to reach those people. I can't requote exactly what you said, but.
Well, the word I used was accommodation. There
Okay,
has to be some, in order for there to be agreements.
exactly. So my question is, how can we do that? Do you have any suggestions on what it would take to make those accommodations? How do we connect with the people that have the views that Len has that are very strong and very entrenched in a way of thinking that is still extremely difficult to move from and to open to new ways of thinking? What would you suggest? How would you suggest we relate to people who are really holding on to a way of thinking that, in my opinion, is no longer working, not for the good of the whole?
Well, it's certainly not for the good of the whole, but that isn't their concern. So I think our challenge, if you will, is to keep coming up with suggestions, with proposals that become too good to, too good to deny, so that this idea of, because even though Israel, you could take a look at the current situation, say Israel winning or whatever, but what does that look like? How does that feel for Israeli citizens necessarily? Most of the time they think it's fine, but how does it feel internally when they become more exposed to what's actually going on? What's actually going on is something that they're prevented from having much awareness of, in the same way that we in the United States, for a long time have little awareness of exactly what the consequences have been of our foreign policy, both in Latin America and the Middle East and so on. So I had an argument with somebody, a CNN commentator at a book fair one time, where I asked him this question. He was like, well, we don't think it's in good taste to show blood. And I said, excuse me, when you see blood, you know that a tragedy has occurred. And it makes you question the motives that went down, that occurred, that created that tragedy. And by denying that visually from people, you're insulating them from reality. And that is a very, I don't see how you're going to be able to resolve situations if you can't have a common experience of what reality is. And the current situation, I think, for Israel is that they're forgive me, Len, for saying this, but I think they're constantly in the process of, creating their own reality, but ignoring the consequences. And for the rest of the world, it's pretty clear what's going on. So, we just have to keep challenging that. And people want to be in touch with the greatest amount of truth in their lives as they possibly can be. That's just innate in human consciousness, I think.
All right, let's have the post-simulation survey. In the pre-simulation, we had 88% yes, 13% no. Let's have this after participating in the simulation. Do you support a common government for the people of Israel and Gaza, West Bank and Gaza, that will make peace? Do you support a common government? Let's see what's the vote now.
Now we're all voting together, correct?
Yeah, we're all voting together now. Okay. So let's publish the vote. Okay, so it went up to 89% yes. So from 88, it went to 89. Well, it really is the same. The same two who objected before are objecting now. And let's see if you can identify yourself. Why do you think that a common government is not a good idea to make peace? Let's have those people that voted no.
I actually voted for the first time and against the second time.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
I thought that,
What's your name, Joshua?
yeah, Myron is the first name. Josh is the family name.
Okay.
I thought that
Myra.
it was important to deal with nitty gritty of things on the ground that would happen in the Confederation. But seeing that it's not really a confederation of accepted states, of recognized states or states that recognize each other, but the Confederation looks to me like it's trying to be a process which will lead to recognition. I find it odd to press Len, who is actually entering into, as Prime Minister of Israel, is entering into an experiment and not entering into a real agreement between recognized states and states that recognize each other. I also find it interesting that Hamas representatives—
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that.
You're talking about a confederation between two states, except one of the states actually has two representatives, each with veto rights, because there's not really a state. You're talking about two different populations, and I'm not sure if it's geographically defined between West Bank and Gaza, or it's between Hamas supporters who would be in the West Bank and perhaps PA supporters who would be in Gaza. What's the relationship between those two states that is somehow also one state in this confederation? That's not clear to me. The second thing is that I find it a little bit weird to think that the Hamas supporters would accept without question the fact that you're talking about a secular confederation. It could be possible. I'm not saying it's not, because maybe they have their own Islamic state and therefore they don't have a problem with a secular confederation. But then I wonder how they would view the idea of education in that common zone. What kind of education we're talking about? Would they accept a secular education? Where is this taking place? Who are the people that are being educated? So that's why the whole thing is a little bit confusing for me. I like the idea that you're dealing with the nitty gritty with the places where Confederation should give us really hope for the future and push us to the future, and where really hard questions might come up about how we cooperate.
Okay, so you initially voted yes, and then you switched to no.
Right.
Okay, so who is the other person? There's another switch from no to yes. Okay, so who is the other person who voted no?
In the beginning, and then voted yes.
So Len, you voted.
I voted no, because I don't see that the IPC.
Wait, you voted no at the beginning and the end?
Yes,
Okay,
because I don't see the IPC creating peace between Israel and the Palestinians. Israel and the Palestinians have to create peace first before the IPC can even be allowed to function. And then I see the IPC as an important tool to smooth out all kinds of areas. But it's not going to create peace where there isn't any in the first place.
okay. Now there is another person who switched from no to yes. Could you identify yourself? Who is the person who voted initially no and then voted yes at the end? Okay, so that person is not.
Maybe my memory is failing me, but I think I voted for it to begin with.
I'm sorry?
I say maybe my memory is failing me, but I think I voted yes at the beginning. But, unless someone else left or was chicken, I don't know. So we won't blame anyone.
I see. Okay. All right.
Jay, did you vote yes both times? You're muted. Jay, you're muted. Can't hear
Were you
you yet.
asking?
I did not vote the first time at all. The second time I voted yes.
Ah,
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So let me just share again. I think that it is possible to, this is what it would take to make a common government, in my opinion, is that if there is a total awareness that in order to have a common government, you need to have an awareness. If there is an awareness, 100% awareness in Israel and Palestine, then a common democracy, common government is a possibility. And it's also a possibility. I noticed that no one really objected to the online election. In Estonia, with 9.5 million people, 40% of Estonia votes online. And by the way, Israeli parties are now voting online as well. So I'm saying that a common election is possible. I want to remind you that a daily war in Israel and Gaza is more than $100 million. And if we have the awareness, we can get the financial support to create it. And I think that it is possible to create peace. Does anyone have any concluding comments? Or questions?
I
can
would just like to comment to our, I think he was a newer participant who was very thoughtful. Now your face just disappeared. Oh, Myron. Yeah, you asked a question about a couple of things that, since I think you might be new, we do cover, like training in the schools, sharing the narratives, having the languages, Arabic and Hebrew, in the classrooms. There are many things that are done in common that bring people together in relationship. And I think that sort of addresses a couple of the comments or questions that you had.
Myron?
Yeah, no, I understand. I think that's all those are important things, but again, the issue, the idea of the IPC, the real IPC, the people here, not what you're simulating, is supposed to create a simulation of a process that will take place between real representatives, or is it a simulation of just to raise issues, to discover what the problems might be, to find the common ground? Because I don't, again, there seems to be just a certain contradiction that the minute the IPC is simulating a situation where people aren't accepting each other, in other words, the status quo, it seems to me that all of the nice common ground that's being discovered is because some of the Hamas and PA people may not be as, well, what's the word in English? May not be as dedicated, let's say, to the real facts on ground that, or their ideologies that are present. They have to come with a present ideology. They have to come with the ideology of Lapid, or the ideology of Abbas, or the ideology of Hani, or anybody else, or somebody in the Hamas, right? So
Myron, can I say something? Because in one of your earlier comments, you talked about the Confederation as being between Israel and the Palestinian Authority and Hamas. That's actually not completely correct. The Confederation is between the people who are living in the lands of Israel and the Palestinian territories. And it is, in a sense, we are trying to bypass all the ideological barriers that have stopped and prevented the process from advancing. So it is a completely, it's a ground up, bottom up approach, attempt to break.
Is that so you're actually thinking about dividing the land between the river and the sea into these regions, 47 regions, they're going to have boundaries that are going to be
No.
geographical areas with 47,000 people in each one? No. So
Just like,
I mean,
where do you live, Myron?
I live in Gush Etzion.
Okay.
So that's like, for example, like the thing about
are you originally from the United States?
Yes.
Okay, where?
Minneapolis.
Okay, so in Minneapolis, you have several congressional districts.
Right.
Okay? They are not really divided. So there is no wall between those congressional districts.
No, but they're geographically defined. Like I in Gush Etzion
Yeah,
might be part of the Palestinian Authority, even though I'm Jewish, because of, you're talking about the wall. If you say that Israel, if Len's claim that Israel should be able to worry about such security because there's not peace yet. So he may be right that there can be some kind of a security barrier, but the security barrier can't include me. I have to be on the Palestinian side of the security barrier because I'm not. Does the green line have any significance? Put it this way, for the IPC.
I don't think you understand.
I'm saying confused. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We are talking about 14 million people in Gaza, Israel, and the West Bank. Those 14 million people will have 300 districts. Each district will have 47,000 people. You're not going to see a wall between the districts. It's going to be mathematical districts based on mathematics, not based on on a wall. No, you wouldn't see anything.
There's a geographical boundary.
There is not going to be any boundary. There is going to be
a line. There has to be a line. A boundary is not it has to be designated by some kind of a line on a map, right?
No, it could be, for instance, let's say,
it's an autonomy. It's more of a national autonomy kind of idea.
Okay, let's say in Gush Etzion, how many people in Gush Etzion?
Wow, depends how you define it.
Okay, let's say in Gush Etzion.
Okay, you could get to 40. You could get to 40,000 Israelis or Jews or whatever you want to call them living in Gush Etzion, Beitar Eli, and Efrat. I don't know what. And then you'd be skipping over my neighbors in Nachalin and my neighbors in Surif and my neighbors in Jabba.
Okay.
And they would have a separate one.
Let's make it easier.
So then you might be talking about some kind of national autonomy or ethnic autonomy.
No.
A confederation between people like that.
No. Let's take this city of Jerusalem.
Yeah.
City of Jerusalem is 1 million people. Okay.
Yeah.
Between Arabs and Jews. Okay. In those 1 million people, if you will have approximately 50 parliament members within Jerusalem. Okay. Yeah. So Jerusalem will elect 50 parliament members. Each person in Jerusalem will be allowed to vote for 1 parliament members. Jerusalem will elect 50 parliament members. The same thing with Gaza. Gaza has 1 million people. Gaza will elect 50 parliament members. Okay.
So Gush Etzion, let's say, has 200,000 people, and they will be able to elect 5 parliament people. And it could be that I will vote for. I have 1 vote, though, right?
Correct.
I have 1 vote.
So you have 1 vote. So
it could be that
you will be able. Let's say your district is Gush Etzion, but also a little bit of an Arab village right next to you. Okay.
Right. So in other words, if it's 50,000, wait, of the 50,000, again, if I have 5 representatives in my 250,000 area here, which would include, let's say, Bethlehem to Chalchul and Bet Umar and Efrat, etc.
Yes.
I have 1 vote, but and I can vote for any one of the 5.
Any one of the 5. Any one of the 5.
In other words, it's not you. So you have 1 large area that someone will create a district called Gush Etzion. Let's say in the Negev or in the Galilee, there will be another district. There'll be another district with also tens of thousands or 100 or 200 or 300,000, and they'll include Arab villages and they'll include Jewish kibbutzim. Right. And then people will be able to vote for any one of the 6 or 7 people running. And so therefore an Arab in a village might decide he wants to vote for one of the Jewish guys, and one of the guys in the kibbutzim might decide he wants to vote for an Arab who's also the mayor of the town next to him or whatever.
Right. Okay. But at the end of the day, you'll end up with 300 parliament members.
But I understand.
Some of them will be Palestinians, some will be Israelis, okay? And in order for them to pass legislation, you would need 55% of the Palestinians to vote yes, and you'll need 55% of the Israelis to vote yes on the same legislation. And
So
once
Hamas, so there will be Hamas representatives from the West Bank, and there'll be there might be PA representatives from Gaza, obviously.
Right, but you are not allowed to run for both governments. You cannot be a member of both governments, and you have to swear allegiance to the Constitution of the common government if you are elected.
So a Palestinian has to decide. But I don't understand about that.
So,
No, it's not.
so a Palestinian will, if a Palestinian is elected, and let's say he is a member of Hamas, okay, he will have to decide whether or not he's swearing allegiance to the Constitution, okay? If he swear allegiance to the common constitution, to the IPC Constitution, he's no longer a member of Hamas. He cannot be a member of Hamas in another government. He has to be only parliament member in this government.
Okay, that I understand. Okay, still the different levels is a little bit confusing for me because the idea of regional government, I think, is also an important thing to put in regional cooperation, etc. But okay, the concept is a little bit hard for me to understand. What's important for me is the work that you're doing, trying to bring up issues that some of the other Confederation people don't necessarily deal with. They don't get necessarily down to the nitty-gritty.
Well, you know, I said you're from Wisconsin, right? Originally.
Minnesota, that's the same thing.
Minnesota, I'm sorry. So as a citizen of Minnesota, as a resident of Minnesota, you decide to run for the federal government, okay? You swear allegiance to the federal government, but you can no longer be a member of the Minnesota government. That's as simple as that. You are now a member of the federal government. You cannot have dual.
In a normal confederation, I'm a citizen of the Confederation. I'm a citizen of my state. I don't know if being a senator makes it illegal for me to be an alderman. That could be, but
no, you're still a citizen of Israel. You,
Myron, I don't know where the border is. Why am I a citizen of Israel?
You still don't know where the border is. You are a citizen of Israel without knowing where the border is.
I'm a citizen of Israel living over the border outside of Israel, and I'm living under military government that's more friendly to me than it is to my Palestinian neighbor, but I'm not living in the state of Israel. And that's why when Len says he wants to have the wall, he may be right. It just shouldn't be where it is now.
We're mixing issues here. You're a citizen
because your concept, not your concept, your concept is great, but your concept is being fulfilled within a reality that's that's inconsistent.
Myron, let's speak about you. You are a citizen of Israel, okay?
Yeah.
You do not, Israel does not have borders yet with the West Bank, but nevertheless, you're a citizen of Israel, okay? Why you're a
borders
citizen?
that somehow recently, it seems that most people recognize the Green Line as a border, including the PA.
You're
Hamas
a citizen,
maybe not.
You're a citizen of Israel, regardless of the border. Why? Because the government of Israel recognized you as a citizen of Israel. That's why you're a citizen, okay? You applied to a citizenship, they reviewed your application, and you became a citizen of Israel. Okay?
And the PA recognizes me being a resident in this geographical area that I can
No,
vote
I'm talking about the government of Israel recognized you as an Israeli citizen. Okay.
But the Confederation includes the PA, which for which I'm voting now.
The Confederation is a government for the whole area. Okay. you are recognized as having the right to vote as a citizen of Israel and as a resident of Israel. You need to have citizenship and residency. You are entitled to vote because of your Israeli citizenship and because of your Israeli or Palestinian residency. You're a resident on the ground, okay? The same with a Palestinian neighbor that you have. He is entitled to vote because he is recognized by the Palestinian government as a citizen of the Palestinian, and he is a resident of that area. So both of you will be entitled to vote for the common government, even though each one of you have different citizenship, but your residency is next to each other. It's
So the common government really isn't a confederation. It's a common government of the people, of peoples that each one wants to create a state. It's not a government. It's not a confederation of two states.
You are adding things. The common government is the government of the people in Israel, the West Bank, Gaza, and
Exactly.
okay.
So it's not a confederation.
They
Not a
elect
confederation of
parliament
states.
members. They elect parliament members, and they're the one who decide. The parliament members. They are the one who decide. What do they want? They may decide that they want to have separation. They may decide that they want to have no separation. They may decide to have a common police force. They may decide to have common joint economic zone. They may decide to pass legislation, just like we demonstrated in the simulation today.
Okay, I'll try to digest that.
The hard thing for people to get, I think your finger's on the point there. When they think about this, they have a hard time understanding that it's not, the IPC doesn't arise as an agreement between the governments of Hamas, the PA, and Israel. That's not its origin. It arises from the people who collectively decide they need a third way.
So it's a little bit like in Europe, where we have a European Parliament elected by the citizens, and then any decision approved by Parliament has to be approved by the members' government before it becomes effective. So the confederation happens when the IPC decisions are past the national veto moment. Then that wraps the whole thing together. But it's a second phase, if you want. The process leading to the creation of the IPC, the election of the IPC Parliament, is a separate thing which is independent of the various governments that are currently running the land.
That sounds like it's important for me to. I think I'll be able to understand it if I learn more about the EU, how it works. Yeah.
Okay.
Can I
Thank you.
say something before we end?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. If Robert NAIMAN is still around, I wanted to ask him a question. Hey, Rob. Okay. Hi. So I guess you were one of the yes votes. So I take it that you personally are you're in favor of this general concept. Do you see this as something which could have potential?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Now, well, what about, like, say, your organization Truth Out? Do you think that I don't know if you have authority to represent them, like, officially, but I'm wondering if I guess what I'd like to see to kind of get this movement off of the ground is organizations coming out, like, officially saying, oh, this is something that has potential. And I was wondering if this might be a possibility for either Truth Out or any other organization that might be involved in. This might be a little bit too much to discuss in just a few minutes. I know that you're on the Daily Cause. I'm actually on that site as well. I post under the name Sandra LLAP, and you might have seen I've commented on some of your posts. So we could communicate more about this offline. I could send you a message through that platform. They have, like, the kind of a messaging system on the Daily Cause. If you can, like, keep a lookout for a message from Sandra LLAP, I'd like to maybe explore that a little bit more. Would you be open to having a little communication about that? Seeing if, like, if like an official capacity of organizations could come out and say that that this is something that we should pursue this idea of a confederation. What do you think of that?
So first of all, I just typed my email address in the chat.
Oh, you did.
So-
Excellent. Oh, so I could just go communicate with you that way. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Don't mind. Then I
So,
can,
so that's number one. I'm happy to hear from you or anybody
Thank
else
you.
here to continue the conversation.
Thank you. That's what. Okay.
Second thing, I want to explain that Truth Out is a news organization and doesn't adopt political stances.
Okay. I see.
But the way that the Truth Out could help is by publicizing the idea.
Yes. That would help a lot.
And so, for example, you or anyone could write about the idea in an article at Truth Out and talk about one of these simulations and publicize and invite people to participate in future simulations. And
Sounds great.
I could help get that published, and you can email me about that.
Excellent. Okay. that was all. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. I want to thank Robert. And I really did. I forgot to ask the same question that Karen just asked. I think that's an excellent question. I forgot. So I want to thank all of you for joining. I thought it was an excellent meeting. We're going to have a lot more meetings. And by the way, I don't know if you know, but I'm having almost a daily live events on TikTok. And many Israelis and Palestinians are showing up. Many, and it's really very interesting. So if you can join on TikTok as well, TikTok is amazing. And people from Israel, Palestine, very intelligent discussion, very beautiful discussion. So, all right. So I'm going to say, unless you guys have any more comments, we haven't heard from Olivia. Usually do, but
well, if you like, I can say I think it's wonderful having Len with us every 2 weeks. Wonderful, and because
he
Len
really
represents about 80% of the Israeli electorate. If I understand the way they've been voting for the last 20 years, Len is, part of the majority. So it's excellent having him. And also this evening, I agree with what Giacomo said. We had, you were able to come to a compromise about something which didn't happen in the past. Wonderful, wonderful. I appreciate Len a great deal, and I understand his fear. What I'd like to underline is that I understand people's fear. I understand the fear on the part of the Israelis, and we have to, come to terms with this and perhaps help them to overcome it. I don't know, but I do take on board, and I do understand Len's fear. Of course I do. And I appreciate him being with us. It's great. It's wonderful.
Okay. Thank you. Karen, can I ask you to write the article and send it to Truth Out?
Oh, I can work on it. I'm not sure of a time frame, but I'll get it on my agenda.
All right. Okay, great.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much. And if anybody else wants to write an article, that'd be great. All right. Thank you so much, all of you.
Thank our guests. Thank you to our guests.
Sean,
See you soon.
Sean,